All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ira Miho, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements for today's session. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in the learning development webinars and programs are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or its affiliates. The content provided in the program is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement by Emory University or the Emory Alumni Association. This session is being recorded, so if you have questions throughout the session, please feel free to put them in the chat and keep your microphones muted to avoid any distractions. Now, I'm excited to introduce our featured speaker, Heather Wilkerson. Heather provides leadership, career, and transformational coaching for individuals and teams. Her primary focus is on managing change and building effective strategies. She has partnered with hundreds of clients ranging from emerging leaders to CEOs to own their strengths and leadership capabilities and to create growth, change, and impact. Heather's systematic approach guides her lifelong goal to create human-centered organizations. By tapping into strengths, clarifying goals, and building leadership skills, clients develop the skills needed to become extraordinary leaders, move to more senior positions, and gain fulfillment within their own unique path. Heather's clients develop new perspectives and insights, rediscovering and reinforcing their values and purpose. Please join me to give a very warm welcome to Heather Wilkerson.
Hiram, thank you so much. Today we're going to delve into interviewing. They asked, Hiram was really smart in thinking like we need to make sure that we stay current, that we keep really addressing career issues for people. So, and this has set up as a Q&A. So I'm going to do about maybe half an hour of sort of running through slides. Anytime you have a question, please put it in the chat. I'll come to some stopping points where I'll ask. But I've got a lot of slides. Maybe we won't even get to all of them if there's some places you want to stop. But just know that this can be interactive, but I will start with some here's some of the basic tips to think about. All right. So like to just start with recognizing that this is tough and let's bring in some humor. So did you know that 23% of video interviews have a cat walking across the keyboard? And I can speak from experience that I've seen a lot of cats in my meetings with people on Zoom. 21% of unlucky interviewees spill a drink on themselves during the interview. Always recommended that you use a water bottle. And 38% of interviewers have accidentally said, "love you," when hanging up on an interview call. So recognize that, hey, this is tough and things are going to happen. But if you can have some ideas about how to best prepare and how to just keep working through it, hopefully this will be useful for you. So the topics that Iram asked for me to cover were some key strategies on how to make a good lasting impression, some common mistakes to avoid, how to effectively answer challenging questions, and tips for showcasing your unique strengths. I'm going to try to cover a lot of that, and I'm going to do that through really talking about your plan for successful interviewing. And speaking of not always getting things right, when I was trying to do some of the slides through Canva, it just was crazy and how it was doing my build. So hey, here's Heather being human for you. So the first part of having a successful interview plan is knowing yourself. You are the product. You're the person that they're trying to get to know, get to hire. So if you don't know yourself, how are you going to communicate that with others? So we'll spend a little time talking about that. Then you need to understand and know the organization. What kind of work do they do? What are their challenges? So that you can be prepared and talk about things about yourself that relate to the organization. Then we'll dive into some best practices, some possible pitfalls, and just some general things that you might need to know. And specifically, we'll talk about online interviews because the majority of at least first interviews today do happen online. So being prepared with your ability to talk and work through technology like this and Zoom will be important. Okay, so knowing yourself. How do you prepare? How do you get to know more about yourself? Well, just get curious on you. What are my strengths? Where have I been successful? And what are examples of those? Where am I trying to go? And how do I want to grow as I'm moving forward in my career? And what would that look like for these positions that I'm looking at? Or does that help me know what is the type of work I want to do, right? When we know more about who we are, we get much more clarity around the type of environment that we could really thrive in, the way where our strengths can show up. I was actually just in a workshop that was talking about burnout. And the number one reason for burnout isn't always the number of hours someone working. It's that lack of feeling that you're able to have congruent values with your workplace and that you are not feeling like you're able to make the impact that you want to make. So when you're identifying what's important to you and matching with those organizations, it will be way easier for you to talk about yourself. So how are you going to then communicate these strengths, these successes? I like to recommend that you call it your star stories, your time when you were absolutely working at your best. And we're going to delve a little bit more into that. So really, it's thinking about what are the key skills needed for a role, and then how much of that do I have? What do those things really get me motivated, really are exciting for me? So a great way to figure that out is to look at our success stories, our star stories. And so this can sometimes feel hard because whenever I say to people, just give yourself permission to recognize times when you delved into your greatness or when you were really feeling motivated, that inner critic comes in. So put it outside the door and really give yourself permission to be like, hey, there were times when I really felt good about what was going on. And as a result, I was doing a great job. Um, but the main part is to be like, when did I feel like time disappeared? When was I like firing on all cylinders? And then sort of get up in the air and look down at it like, what was the environment I was in? Who was I with? What skills was I using, right? What did I see about me that I could say, oh, I bet that's a strength that I have? Do you know most people don't really know what their strengths are because they're so natural. It feels like just the way you're supposed to be that they don't recognize it as a strength. But somebody else who doesn't have that strength, they would think that was next to impossible. So, for instance, if you're someone who is very great at making connections, which is one of my strengths, then as soon as somebody starts talking about a problem or a disconnect in an organization, you will start seeing ways to, build community or set up structures that hasn't never occurred to them, right? And for you, it's just visualizing in your head. So really give yourself permission for noticing what are my strengths and what characteristics do I have that, will help me stand out, that I want to share, that I could bring to the organizations that I'm going to be interviewing with. Once you have these examples of success, then these are great answers to interview questions, and especially behavioral interview questions. So, what is a behavioral interview question? In case you don't know, it's where they're asking you about situations in the past where you've used or had to use certain behaviors. So, these questions will usually start with, give me an example of. tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you had a difficult colleague. Tell me about a time when you had a project change midstream, and how did you handle that? The best way to answer that is with delving into those examples of success and thinking about which ones might relate to those. And a great way to structure the answers, I used to just say star, but now I'm morphing, growing in the industry, into calling it a CARI statement. And I'll tell you a little bit why. One, because there's more on the emphasis of what you did, how you grew from the situation. So CARI is the context, the action you took, the results that you were able to produce, and the impact of it. Maybe the impact on you and maybe the impact on the organization. So context. What was the situation? You don't want to spend a lot of time. And so part of thinking this through in advance is how much do they need to know? Just some specifics to set the scenes, but not too much. One mistake people often make is they go into a lot of detail on the context and they run out of time, or they use so much bandwidth of the person trying to listen that they don't really get to action, results, and impact. Action, the steps that you took to address the problem. Organizations are looking for you to take action, and action steps is a great way for you to highlight you as a person, you as somebody who can also be a doer or a beer, right? I was thinking, I had to analyze, I had to jump in and help bring people together. But it's, you not only saying that you have it, but you showing that these are things that you do regularly and naturally. And then you want to highlight some results. And not everything's going to be quantifiable. Not everything is even to show, qualities. It might be hard to realize, but almost everything that we do and actions that we take will have some results. And when there is a problem and then that problem gets ameliorated or improved or given a structure, that is results that you have developed. So outcomes, think about, how were things improved? How did you make things better? How were things more efficient, right? Again, think of the strengths and what might happen as an outcome of that. Impact is similar to results, but it's also a way to show you as a person who grows, you as a person who sees that there are strategies, there are ways to continue to have more results, right? To make an impact. So learning how the organization learned, and also sometimes things didn't work out. You're going to get questions about failure, but showing that you can recognize and learn and see ways to do things different the next time, that's a great result that you can show through impact, okay? And it also really shows your critical thinking, that you're able to analyze something. So how do you apply this, right? Okay, who likes getting the question, what's your weakness? It's a terrible question. We all hate it. I've never had a client that didn't struggle with this. And the reality is, we're all going to fail at something. Everyone has something that they're working on to improve themselves better, right? We all have room to grow, or we would not be human. So how do I be honest and frame it so that we're showing impact, that we are a person who learns and that can see the positive in things? Most people want to work with somebody and have someone on their team who can step back and, see how things could be better and own that, like, yeah, maybe that didn't work, but they can get to the positive, right? So that they're going to be a good person to work with. So the context, here's a weakness that I have, just FYI, don't choose something that is like the most important skill and strength to have in that job. Say the weakness is, I'm not great with time management. So what happened that made you realize this about yourself? I found that I was always coming a few minutes late to meetings, because for me, I get so enthralled with the people I'm with, the project I'm working on, that I find it really hard to stop and move to the next thing, and honor that until I'm there, and then I'm all in for that one. Um, so specific steps that you took or are taking the work on that. I set lots of timers. I fool myself with saying things start way before they do. I always give myself something to really look forward to in the next one, which it helps me move on. Um, and so I've really learned that these are the things that motivate me and help me move forward. Some of the impact. Okay. So thinking about that for you. Oh, another question. So as you've gotten to know yourself, now you need to think about, how am I going to tell that to people, right? The tell me about yourself question is really your elevator pitch. But it's also needs to be targeted to the position you're interviewing for and the organization you're interviewing for. And there's a couple of different things that they want to know. So the first, okay. What happened? Okay. Oh, goodness. All right. It's not going to give me my build. Um, so you want to know, the first thing they want to know. Oh, there you go. The why. Um, why are they asking this? They want to know who you are, what you're looking for, and how you will benefit the company. So the way you're going to answer this in the format is some background, but how you got here, right? A little bit about your education, your past work experience, but pertinent, that relates to where you are, right? It's like connecting the dots, right? It's the context of the Kari. Two strength skills that help define you and that are related to that position. Not to make that up, not to change, but you may have 8 skills. What are the top 2 that this position has said it's looking for? And highlight that and tie it into my experience. And so I had the ability to really notice that I excelled in X, Y, and Z, which is why, gets you to the last point, I really want to dive into a higher level marketing director role so I can take all my experience and really use my ability to connect and lead others. Great. So I've got my goal and how it relates. And then the last thing is, okay, now that I've done this, what are some things that you can do to stand out, right? What are some of the tricks? Really think about how you add value. Did you save money? Did you save time? Did you improve processes? And this might come in the tell me about yourself. It might come with those other questions that are often asked of, like, what makes you a good fit for this role? What do you bring to the table? Why are you interested in this position? Okay, so we talked about knowing yourself. Now we're going to talk about knowing the organization. Oh, Heather is really doing an amazing job with the slides here. Okay. What are employers looking for? I just wanted to jump back to this because this helps us know, what are we doing? How do we get to know the organization? Is to understand, well, what do they want? So then, how do I then relate to the situation, right? We could learn a lot of things, but how do we make it pertinent? So they want to know, can you do the job? Are you a fit for the job? And will you do the job, right? So what are your knowledge, skills, and abilities? Knowing yourself. Are you a fit for job? You're going to fit with their work culture, with their values and the skills and strengths that they need. And will you do the job? Do you have an experience of taking action and being motivated? Are you someone who really wants to be in this field, right? So all that knowing about yourself builds to relating to what they need and what they want. Okay, great. So how do you prepare? First, you're going to research the organization. So again, through that lens, you're going to look at what are their mission, what are their products, what are their challenges, what's the culture like, what are their goals. You can do that through LinkedIn, through their websites, and through asking people. You're also going to try and understand the job description. Really read it with a fine-tooth comb, looking for what are the key skills and strengths that they highlight. Guess what? Usually between the web page and looking what people say about an organization and looking at the key skills, we get a real idea of what's important to them and what I should talk about. What stories should I have? What Corey story should I have prepared? Also, find out who you're interviewing with and get to know them. See if there's anything you have in common. It makes the conversation much easier. What's their experience? What's their background? What are their interests? And like, what did they do before? It also helps you know, well, what's the stepping stones? What type of skills and strengths does this position value? Now, we are lucky today. We have a great tool called AI. So if you're feeling stuck preparing for an interview, you can use AI. It is a really great tool for generating questions, for getting ideas of what questions they might ask you, for doing a lot of research on the company, for getting some ideas of how to write a thank you note. So how do you do that? AI is pretty specific for those of you who haven't used it, it's really about prompting. A lot of coders say that the new coding is prompting. So you can write it by looking the best way to get a really accurate answer that's targeted to what you're looking for is to use this RTRI sort of model. Um, Give it a role. Act as if you're the director of marketing for a tech firm. Um, let's see. Oh, one did. No. And then give it a task, right? Summarize all the last projects that Johnson & Johnson has done and what has been their marketing campaign. Requirements. What are the biggest challenges that this organization, and send it to me in a Word doc, right? Give it some instructions. So just another tip for you to use that can hopefully make your process a little easier. Okay, so I've given a few of the best practices, a few tips and pitfalls, but I'll just dive into maybe a few more, right? So we've prepared, we've talked about the interview, now you're there. As much as we hate it, like first impressions still matter. It gives, people have a lot of unconscious bias. They get a first impression. They say it takes 5 or 6 seconds. So, and especially when you're on video, you want to really think about it. And I'll dive more into that. But know that being prepared, thinking about your language, using words that are at the level that you want to present yourself, smiling, speaking up, looking into the camera or looking in the eye of the interviewer, whichever way you're doing it, can make a huge difference and just, can take away any of those unconscious things that you don't want to get in the way. Okay, so you're in the interview, you're making a great impression. Just a reminder, the goal for mainly first interviews is a screening for fit, right? I've seen from your resume that it looks like you've got the experience that we need. 1, is this real? And 2, are you actually a good fit for our organization? Like, do you seem like someone who is actually a doer? So how do you do this? So think about, you want to really listen to what they're asking, and you want to be able to articulate, right? So some of that preparation on yourself will make it so that you can give clear answers. what are they looking for, especially in this beginning, is that you can learn. You don't have to know everything. So think about times when you didn't know everything. You weren't aware of a situation, but you were able to learn. That you can take direction, that you'll be a good team player, that you're flexible. Um, these are all just general skills that most of us need to get along well with our colleagues and be a good team player. The biggest key is really practice. Getting practice answering those questions that you're worried about, that are tough for you. Practice talking about yourself. And really, really, really do your homework. Okay. Um, as I mentioned, a lot of first interviews, maybe second, third interviews are virtual today. So just like to give people some ideas of how to prepare for that and just things to think through. Most of this is common sense, but I see it every day, the things that people don't think through. So their technical setup. Um, is the equipment testing it out? Is there good lighting? Is your camera at the right eye level, right? I was able to raise my desk and get me at a place where, it's sort of shoulders up, right? I changed the background so that it wasn't too busy. Plus, there's a terrible looking board behind me in this room that I'm in. So, things about your technical setup, giving yourself a great background, right? If you don't like to use a background at my office at home, I've created a nice background because sometimes I move around a lot and my head disappears in Zoom, although they seem to have gotten much better with their backgrounds. Um, Quiet. I don't know how many times I have been talking to people. I've been doing a mock interview and somebody knocks on the door, a child comes running in. So just think that through. Have projects ready to load, a cheat sheet. The best thing about virtual interviews is you can have your list of the keywords you want to communicate right there. But you also want to be careful not to be reading the whole time because people will notice when you're looking over here, right? When I look to see for an example on my slide, like I went like that into the other screen. So things to watch out for. The most important thing is to recognize that it's harder to create some relationship and connection on Zoom or Teams or whatever. So look at your energy level, smile more than you think you would normally, and lean in, right? Expect that there may be some technical difficulties and just notice that there might be some delays and, sort of hesitate before you jump right in because a lot of times people can be talking over each other or people. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this, testing your equipment, poor lighting, camera eye level, locations. I'm noticing the time and I do want to be sure that there's room for questions. There's just a few more things, right? So here's a good checklist. Think about your posture, the view, paying attention. A couple of things I didn't mention, being transparent, especially when you're working online. If you're looking something up or you're like, oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna look at that in my resume and remind me. It's good to sort of talk through what you're doing. Even in a non video interview, it's okay to take a moment to think. I work with a lot of program developers and they have to talk through technical issues. And I say, even if you don't know the answers, talk it through. Um, Give yourself um, the respect of that your knowledge is there, even if you don't get all the way to the answers. At an end of every interview, it's really important to ask questions. And what did I just say? At the end of an interview, within an interview. So what does that mean, right? I get a lot of questions like, what are good questions? So I would like to just take a little bit of time to talk about this because this is a two-way street. You're also in the interview. However, what I always like to stress for clients is that you want to be getting information, but you want to get it in a positive way. But you also want to get to, unless you know from the beginning that, oh, this isn't a good fit for me, you want to get to the finish line so you get to have the power. You get to make the choice. You get to negotiate your benefits, your salary. So staying invested in selling yourself as far as you can with getting the information you need to support you in that is really important. You can find out a lot of information through websites, through Glassdoor, through, a lot of times you're going to have an HR interview and they're going to cover a lot of those tough questions. So you really want to ask questions that are related to the goals of the company, the problems maybe that they have to solve, and their plans. It shows that you are interested. So thinking about asking questions that will provide you with insights and meaningful discussion to keep driving the conversation forward, that allow you to sell yourself, to talk more about you. Also, that can be targeted. You could probably talk about 20 things in your background, but they care about these 3 things. Wouldn't it be better for you if you're clear on what those 3 things are, than talking for 20 minutes on something that you thought was important, and then it's the end of the interview and you say, so would you like to know anything else? And they ask about something that was really important to you that you didn't get to share all the way through. Okay, so here's some questions that demonstrate your interest. How does this department relate to the organization's goals? Structure of this group, existing team strengths, company strategy. How do people like to give and receive feedback? 3 most important skills needed to excel in this position. And this one I would say, ask early. Biggest challenges for this position, most rewarding aspects of the job. So I think you've heard me say, right? Ask questions early. Finish your answers with a question. So somebody says, tell me about yourself, right? So you're talking about yourself, what your goals, end of it. So what are the goals for this department, right? What are the 3 skills that you think are most important at this, for this role, for someone to excel in this position? 1, you've made it more conversational. And 2, you're getting the key information you need to target your answers and to talk about what they're interested in and to highlight the skills and strengths that relate to this job. Say you've really studied the job description and it was written by someone in HR who doesn't actually know what the job is, and you get in there and the person you're interviewing for has a big challenge that other people weren't aware of, that's not mentioned in the job description, which happens to be something that you have faced before, voila, perfect. Now you get to be the candidate who stands out because you happen to ask right at the beginning, what is it that you really need me to do? Okay. A question that I always recommend at the end, in case you didn't get this information earlier, is there anything about me making you hesitant? And so that way you get to address it. I have so many clients who say, I wish I knew why I didn't get the job. You can always ask, you might never get the answer. And here's a way for you to at least try and get it here while you can still address it. Okay. Some questions that I recommend that you don't ask, at least not at the beginning. Questions related to vacation, working remotely, benefits, perks. I totally get that these are really important to you, just not when you're first talking with the manager about you. You want to first get them on board with you, and hopefully a lot of those things you were able to figure out through your research. It's just wanting at this point to focus on things that are important to you. So mentorship, again, these are about you. We're talking about selling yourself to them, compensation, a bad news story. I totally understand that you have concerns and you're making it 2-way, right? So for instance, mentoring, you're looking at how am I going to grow? Why not ask about mentoring? One, if they don't have a structured program, they may think, oh, we're not going to be able to offer enough, or this person has a real expectation that I'm not going to be able to meet. So you can talk about approach to onboarding. How do you give feedback? Tell me about how your group works as a team. Those are all ways that you'll get an idea of, are people going to be supportive of me? It's not that you don't have every right and won't eventually get to these questions. It's just wait until you have the offer or it's the benefits conversation. Because first you want them to know I am the right fit, right? I am good for this culture. And you're going to get a real idea if you're not early on, and that it's not a right fit for you. And then you'll pull yourself out. So we've prepared, we have practiced, we've thought about some difficult questions. So how's the interview going? The interview went great. And now you want to end it with a great note. So write a thank you note. Write it within 24 to 48 hours. Remind them who you are, what the job was. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed coming to Johnson & Johnson and talking to you about the marketing director position. And then pull in something specific that you talked about. And a great thing is, what if you found out something at the end, or you got off the call, you walked out and you got in your car and you're like, oh, I really wanted to talk about this. This would be a great selling point. Put it in your thank you note. Reiterate your interest and really thank them for their time, right? This takes a lot of time out of people's day to interview. Being appreciative. It's hard to be someone interviewing. It feels like a lot. And companies who don't have people who can do their job and they're losing clients, or they've hired someone who really was unhappy and a bad fit and didn't get along with people, that can really hurt an organization. So as much as it's hard to see it from their point of view, it is a two-way street. So just to give them a little bit. All right, now I've talked over half an hour. I apologize about that. I hope that this built a good foundation, and now I'd love to hear from you. So Iram, do we have any questions?
We do. So the first question was relating to the bonus tip that you said, is there anything you're hesitant about? Would you ask that in the second or third interview, correct? Or would you do that in the first?
Well, it really depends on who you're talking about. And if you're clear on what the interview process is. If the first interview is more of a clearance with the human resources person, I wouldn't worry about asking that. But if you're getting a feeling that, I don't know, it seems like they're looking for a certain skill, then it's always okay to ask, what's a key skill that you're looking for that you're concerned about that I might not have, right? You could put it that way. So it's never a bad question, but you could think about where it is. It's a great question when you're really trying to seal the deal and you want to be sure that you were able to get as many of your highlights out there.
And just as a little side note, I actually asked a version of that in my interview for this position with Emory.
Nice, yeah.
So that makes me feel good that okay, I did the right thing. It was just like, I just wanted to know. All right, so the next question we have is, let's see, for positions asking for more experience than listed on your resume, how do you sell yourself in the interview?
Yeah, that is great. A great question. It does come up. One of the questions I usually ask my client is, are you really giving yourself the respect and credit you need for how much work you've actually done, how much you've actually led? So one, I always start there because I have found that most of my clients discount themselves. And just because you don't necessarily have the title doesn't mean that you didn't lead through influence, that you didn't make an impact, even though you were part of a team. So give yourself the credit that you deserve. Secondly, maybe you've gotten that in some volunteer positions. Maybe you've had other things in your life, so feel free to bring that in. Maybe you've supplemented it through some executive education classes. Bring that in. The other thing is you could say, I have done everything possible in this position, and I'm ready for the next level. Career growth means you shouldn't have everything in that job. You should be a stretch, right? You're trying to go to the next level. Um, I, I will be transparent and say that that has been a little harder in this job market. I'm not 100% sure why, but I have heard that a lot from my clients that pivot, and I've seen it in a lot of the research that it is a little more challenging, not impossible, but it is more challenging. So good question.
All right, the next question we have, do you have suggestions for getting referrals? In what cases is it acceptable to ask someone for a referral?
Suggestions for getting referrals. Well, I mean, I think there's probably lots of people out there who have enjoyed working with you, who have seen your work, who value you as a person, who would be willing to be a referral. It doesn't obviously sometimes it's hard, especially if people don't know you're looking, to ask your current manager. There may be colleagues that you can ask, past managers, people that you've served on a board with. I've had people who worked on special projects with me. Again, don't undervalue that you are a person of worth. And there's probably so many people out there that would be willing to refer you. Never, ever have I had a client that wasn't able to get referrals. And people who thought, I don't know, and absolutely were afraid to ask. And they were like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. Past professors if you're new and young.
Perfect. Great answer. So the next question is actually very interesting. Sometimes, interviews, they ask you stuff that technically they're not supposed to. So what questions should you not answer in the first interview, such as like accommodations or disabilities and things like that?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule. I would just say never answer something that you're uncomfortable answering, but it's always okay. eh, give people the benefit of the doubt. Assume good intentions. So start from the positive, but it's okay to say, so how does this relate to the position? Right? Like, what's important about this that makes this something you need to know, right? So it's okay to get curious around it if it's something that you're feeling uncomfortable with. Maybe not in the current climate, but I would have said in the past, sometimes it's important to let people know if there's a special accommodation you need, but that you've already, like, you work on it, you've got it, so that you can address it. But also say, I had a client who was hard of hearing, and so they were able to set up the closed caption in the video interviews. And that was why the interviewer wanted to know that. But you certainly can say, you know, I think I'll answer that at a later date. Or, once you make me the offer, I'm happy to talk more about that.
Ooh, I like that. Our next question is, you may not know who the interviewers will be, particularly for an initial interview. do you have any advice for finding this information prior to your interview? Because it's always good to have a little, I'm sure every time I have a meeting, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll look up the person so I know a little bit about them before the meeting. So how do you handle that for interviews?
Whoever set up the interview, hi, I thank you for setting up the interview. Can you please share with me the names and the titles of the people I'm going to be interviewing with so I can be prepared? You absolutely, and it's in their best interest. They probably want you to know. It probably just slipped the person's mind. And if they say, oh, well, we're not clear who all is going to be in the room, say, great, when you find out, I would love to know. Please share that with me. And the day before, if you haven't found out, just follow up. Hey, I'm very excited about tomorrow. I'm just following up. You thought there might be somebody else in the room. Could you clarify that? Ask. You need to know these things.
These are great answers, great questions and great answers.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for sending a second, like follow-up email after not getting a response after the interview? So like you're waiting to hear back, you haven't heard anything. How should you reach out and follow up?
Yes, great. Another question that I don't really put it on there, but if you don't know what is the time frame before you leave an interview, you should ask. So what are the next steps? When can I expect to hear from you? What does the process include going forward? Right? It may mean that's again, you need to be prepared, right? Am I going to be doing a panel interview? Are you interviewing 25 people and you won't be able to tell me for a month, right? That's all good things to ask so that you know. If they've told you a timeline or the person wasn't sure, then I would always give it a week or to the deadline that they said. And then, again, be as positive and appreciative as you can, and really show your interest. I'm very interested in this position. Highlight again another strength. I really think that my blah, blah, blah would be a great fit for this position. I loved meeting everyone. I'm really hoping to be able to move to the next step. Please let me know what the status is.
All right. And you actually already covered the next question, which asked about the acceptable amount of time between following up with a recruiter. So you kind of already covered that. Now, this one is a little bit more specific. It says, Roy asks, in medical residency programs, you get a lot of qualified applicants, with most of us having more or less similar resumes. How do you effectively stand out?
What's his name?
Roy.
Person's name? Roy. Roy, everyone is unique. So you need to think about what makes me special. What have I done that might not feel different, but probably is? Maybe you volunteered in a certain community. Maybe you speak another language. Maybe you, played rugby and you saw a lot of interesting, accidents or injuries that somebody else might not have seen. Think about what is interesting and unique about you and put that out there. Put it on your resume, put it on your CV.
Okay. And then the next one's kind of along the same lines of what do you recommend to get your resume noticed amongst a large pool of applicants? So, there's
What?
so many people applying for the same job. So before you even get the interview, how do you make your resume stand out?
You reach out, you take that initiative, you network, you create some relationship so that you're more than just that marketing piece, that piece of paper, or that file that came online into a box. And it's another workshop, but once a position is posted, especially on a big site like Monster or LinkedIn, your competition could be thousands, right? So still, and even more so, because when there's a competitive job market, a lot of positions are already out there before they are posted. So the more we know about who we are, what we value, where we would be a good fit, then we can start targeting the organizations that would be great for us, the industries that are have the missions that are tied to the kind of impact we want. And you can start that networking and building out and, connecting to people on LinkedIn.
Correct. So this one's interesting also. So if you have a personal situation that affected previous job performance, and it'll probably come up in references and stuff, should you mention that in the interview preemptively? And if so, how would be the best way to do that?
So the first thing that came into my head is that we are assuming very few employers will reveal information. Most will only say that you worked somewhere. So I part of that is, leave that to yourself, right? If you want to use something as a failure or a growth opportunity, feel free to do that, but you are not beholden to share something that you're not comfortable with.
Thank you.
And also, I would say, just on a second, because I get this a lot from clients, and sometimes when they tell me the story, and then they can show how much growth they had, and that it actually, I'm like, that's like that's normal. Like that's something that's okay. So think about how you might be shaming yourself. Tell the story to a good friend, right? Someone you trust, and talk it through, right? Because you might feel really horrible about something that is right. You're many people are experiencing.
And the thank you note, do you send that after every single interview or just like the first, second, like?
Oh, I talked over you. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Every interview, every person.
Perfect. All right, so we are almost at time. So I have some important announcements that I want to share, but I want to make sure we got to everyone's questions. I got everything in the chat, I believe. If there's anyone who I missed out on, please feel free to share that now. So Hillary asked, I'm curious how many people are interviewed for first, second, and third rounds typically?
Is the question, do companies often go to 3 rounds? I mean,
Hillary, yeah, is your question, do they go to the 3 rounds, or is it how many people do they interview in each round?
Oh, how? 10 people to
Oh,
7.
okay, yeah, so how do they cut it down? Like, so if they did 10 in the first, is it 5 in the second, third, 3 in the third? Like, how do they break it down typically is?
I mean, every company has their own, every manager has their own sort of way that they like to do things. It'd be great if there was, I mean, I wouldn't have a job if recruiting was very structured as the same for every organization. There would be, it would be clear. But people have their own style. I mean, and it also depends on the applicant pool. And it depends on the bandwidth and the time that they have. So, I mean, I wish I had the magic wand to know that. But certainly know that organizations are not going to bring a ton of people in for an interview. And the biggest hurdle is actually getting to the interview. So any of you who get to a first interview, you should pat yourself on the back, because that is a great accomplishment, getting through, all these, that reviewing process.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining today's session and participating in all the wonderful questions. This session does qualify for our attendance, certificate of attendance program. So you'll receive an email with the link to request your certificate, along with a link to complete a short survey. So please take a few minutes to share your feedback with us. On behalf of Emory Alumni Association, we want to thank you again for learning with us. As a reminder, we have 2 events next week. Monday, March 10th is our Trailblazer Talks, excuse me, Demystify Board Service. And then on Tuesday, we have Survive and Thrive, Job Hacks for Unexpected Career Transitions. Both sessions are virtual and will start at 12 p.m. We do encourage you to reach out to Heather to schedule for our alumni to schedule your complimentary session with her. And I will share her contact information in a follow-up email along with the recording for today's session. And thank you, Heather, for being with us and for your time and these great tips and information.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you, Aram, for this great program that you put together. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.